ever feel like you're chasing a moving target, or like being good enough always feels like it's just out of reach? I get it. Growing up with a father who was an addict, losing a parent at a young age, and battling obsessive compulsive disorder throughout my life has taught me much about shame, guilt, and always trying to be good enough. But what if being good enough is a myth? What if your worth is not something to chase or try to measure up to? This is the Enough Effect podcast, a space to rewrite the narrative, share stories, and discover the power of being you exactly as you are. Today, we're jumping right into episode 9 of the Enough Effect. I am your host, Abby Tabilos, and today we're going to be talking about a component of mental health and mental illness that I don't see talked about a lot on the internet. And before I just dive in or jump into this topic, I just want to acknowledge, as a bit of backstory, that mental illness can take a lot from you. It's not a secret, right? People who have depression and anxiety and OCD and ADHD and other mental illnesses, those are fundamentally things which change your life. And if you have depression, it can make it difficult to enjoy moments with your family or get out of bed and enjoy anything at all about your life. Anxiety can keep you away from certain situations as well, or it can just make functioning in day-to-day life very difficult. OCD can make you question everything about your life and who you are as a person and make you waste time doing silly things to try and find certainty. And so fundamentally, mental illnesses take things. That leads to many people, and I know I'm not alone in expressing these sentiments, believing or feeling or thinking, if I didn't have anxiety, then I would be happy. Or my life would be so much better if I just didn't have OCD. And to some people, they might just be thinking, hey, that's just because humans in general tend to think that the grass is greener on the other side. And that may be true. However, it is important to address that there is a component of grief when it comes to mental health. And that component of grief and grieving what your life could have or should have or would have been without that mental illness that I want to address. And as I get into today's episode, I just want to provide a little bit of a disclaimer that those who struggle with those feelings, they're 100% more than valid. They are very real experiences and they exist because they are real and they are true. I am just here to offer a perspective that I gained from being in therapy and thinking about this on my own that changed everything for me. Because I think that especially if you're somebody who struggles with OCD or with anxiety, getting into these modes of thinking about mourning what life could have been and grieving that life, those types of things can bring up feelings of depression and hopelessness. That's the last thing that you need or want when you're already struggling with OCD or anxiety. So that perspective that I wanted to share actually came up during one of my OCD support groups that I attend pretty much every week. And somebody brought up in the support group, like, hey, does anyone else ever just get angry that they have OCD or that things are this way? And of course, out of everybody that was attending the group, so many people related to that feeling and to that sentiment. And the therapist that kind of guides those support group sessions, she let everybody, express their feelings. And then she came in and she said something that really changed things for me. But it was a gradual change because at first I did find it a little bit ouch. And she said, first of all, I want to remind everybody here that you are not your OCD, that your OCD is a part of you, but it is not all of you. And I think that that's something that people with any mental illness might struggle with, is feeling like that disorder really defines who they are as a person. And I think that that's an important thing to mention before we get into the second thing. And the second thing is that essentially everybody has something. Don't click off this podcast because I know you've heard that before and in a way that was like toxic positivity and not helpful. And that's where my brain went at first when this therapist was explaining the concept to me. However, she said, do you not think that people who have been diagnosed with cancer or who have another terminal illness, they're stuck in the hospital, do you not think that they also feel that way? That they mourn and grieve what their life could and should have been? Do you not think that people with diabetes or who are missing a limb or with other ailments think this way? Because there are so many people who think if this one thing was just different, then everything else would be. Along with that sentiment comes the thought process of, this is so unfair, why me? Like, I didn't ask to be born with OCD. I didn't ask to get cancer. I didn't ask to XYZ. And those are valid feelings. Those are real and 100% based on truth and fact. But I think that as we process those feelings and feel those emotions and let them be part of us, it is then that we're able to adopt this other mindset, which is that OCD is very good at making you feel like you are special in a bad way. It makes you feel like everything is the worst for you. And I think that that's not something that's unique to OCD, because everybody has something, and everybody probably goes through these feelings and emotions at one point in their life. So what can we do about it, right? After you process and acknowledge that, move to a space where you're allowing yourself to see the flip side of the coin. Because we've talked about this in the support group as well, is that, yeah, OCD changes my life, and in a lot of ways in a bad way, but also OCD makes me very attentive to detail. It makes me very aware of how the people around me are feeling. And so for that reason, I feel like people with OCD tend to be a little bit more caring and empathetic. They relate to those struggles. OCD also kind of forces you to run toward your values and what things matter most to you in order to recover. And so that tends to make you somebody who's able to help other people and relate to them. And I don't have cancer, and I don't have diabetes, and I don't have autism, so I can't speak to the flip side of the coin for those. But what comes to mind is that there's always a flip side to the coin, not in a way to invalidate your feelings, but in a way to adopt a healthier mindset as you process feelings. And second, this quote that I saw online recently that said, don't fool yourself into thinking that things could have been any different. Because I think that when we get into the what ifs of mental health and the grieving and the would have, could have, should have's, it's painful and it hurts, and we should feel that. But also, it's beautiful to be you. And you are not defined by your mental illness. And you can live a beautiful, fulfilling, hard, and happy life with OCD and with whatever ailment that you're having. So yes, it's more than okay to mourn and grieve that you have OCD or anxiety and that you wish things were different. But it's also equally as important to accept and love everything that it means to be you. I'm not saying you have to be in love with the fact that you have OCD or anxiety, but you can accept that part of yourself and stop fighting and resisting against it. So that acceptance and that love might be a complicated relationship, and it might be very difficult and very hard, but I do think it's the only way that we can reach true healing. So mourn, but don't wish away what it means to be you. Every single part of you. You are not defined by your mental illness, but it is a part of you, and you can do it. For more information on what we talked about in today's episode, please go to abbytobelos.com and check out my blog post where I dive into this a little bit more. And also hit me up on all my socials at ABSTABBS or ABSTABS, where I also talk about the same things I'm talking about on the podcast in greater detail, because my goal here is just to give you daily reminders to help you live a more emotionally healthful life and to advocate for people who struggle with their mental health every single day. I will talk to you next time. Thank you for listening to the Enough Effect podcast. If you enjoyed listening, it would mean the world to me if you would subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment your favorite thing from today's episode. Plus, don't forget to hit up my social media at ABSTABS, ABSTABBS on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook for daily inspirational content to remind you that you can live a life built upon the resounding belief that being good enough was never an endeavor worth pursuing. Lastly, check out my show notes for any resources mentioned in this episode and my website, where you can find a list of all the ways I would love to work with you. See you next week, and don't forget that you are and always have been more